Honestly, it made a huge impact on me when I first saw the Gymnast Alliance stuff come up, and that being led from Great Britain. It was really just kind of eye-opening that this is a global problem, and I think that the Film Athlete A really helped, I don't know, give athletes the courage to come forward and say, I was treated this way and it's not right, and I would like to see a change. And I think the biggest thing about it and what the athletes are saying right now is I don't think they're trying to ruin anybody as far as their coaches, their clubs. I think they're trying to say this wasn't right and it needs to change.
I think you're right. As a lot of the women we've been speaking to, they were girls then, they're now women, have been saying it isn't really a witch hunt. They have bad memories of their coaches, some of them, but it's not a witch hunt. But they are really keen to pave the way for a safer, more enjoyable gymnastics going forward, because it is a really, really popular sport in this country.
Mm-hmm. Same in the US.
Do you understand the courage it's taken these girls to speak up, though?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of the people that are coming forward are, former gymnasts, because they feel like it's not going to risk their standing in the sport, which is really unfortunate that we haven't heard from more current gymnasts being able to step forward and say, this is happening to me too. And I think that we won't see real change until the current athletes are able to come forward. And unfortunately, at this point, and I think it is fair to say it's in most countries, that it could be risking their standing on their national teams.
So today, would you be advising them to come forward, or do you get why they're not?
I would advise them from a moral and ethical place to, yes, come forward, because whatever is happening to you will happen to the next girl and the next girl and the next girl, or the boys as well. I do have compassion for where they're standing, but in reality, their national teams should be set up in such a way that this is about your gymnastics. If you can go out and win the medals that your country wants you to win, it shouldn't matter if you're outspoken or not. You're looking for change. You're looking to better the world. So who doesn't want that representation?
Do you think the governing bodies hold a huge responsibility here in their push for success? We get why they want success. The gymnasts want success, so do the coaches. But do you think the governing bodies have more of a responsibility to oversee what has obviously been going on under their noses?
I do think that there is a degree where the governing bodies should be stepping in, especially if things have been reported. If there have been incidences of abuse or neglect that have been reported, and the governing bodies are stifling them and sanctioning them and putting them off to the side because of risk of medals and, oh, this is a top coach, we don't want to remove them, I think that that is a huge problem.
Is that a pressure that you recognize?
Well, I don't recognize it because I haven't felt the need to. If I'm one of those people who, if there's something to report, I'm going to report and I'm going to follow up on it.
What do you think it says about the relationship between the coach and the gymnast? The situation we're in at the moment it's obviously something that's fairly unique.
Well, honestly, I can't speak for other people and their relationships with their coaches. And I certainly am not perfect, but it's hard for me to look at it and either condemn a coach by something that's been said or say, no, that never happened, because I'm not in that athlete's shoes. I would hope that every coach moving forward learns how to have an open communication with their athlete so that their athlete feels like they can come to them and say, I don't like when this happens, or this doesn't motivate me, or I'm afraid, or I'm sick, or I'm sad today, because we're human and everybody's going to go through that gamut of emotions. And as a coach, you have to know how to change what your training plan is for the day, depending on what that human standing in front of you is giving you. So it's really a coach is doing a disservice to the athlete when they don't listen to them.
A lot of the women we've spoken to have said that the sport has become, in this country, the sport has become more coach focused than it should be. In other words, it's not all about the athlete, it's about the coach too. Do you think there's a danger in that?
I do, yeah, I do think there's a danger in it becoming too coach focused. I, again, that's not my experience. I've always been athlete centric. You know, it's about the athlete, it's about the athlete's gymnastics. So I have to be malleable to change. Um, I think there is a flip side to that question, because often I think that coaches aren't given the recognition that they deserve. So it's not saying that that should allow abuse to come in, but it is, you know, to me, getting someone to any status in gymnastics, it's a partnership. And if you're not working with the athlete, if the coach and athlete aren't working together, there's not going to be overall success. And I would like to think that's why my athletes have been successful in the past, is because we've had that communication. You know, have we erred along the way? Yes, but there's been that communication. There's that ability to go back and say, you know, okay, I was wrong in this situation and I'm sorry. And being able to do that, that keeps that line of communication open. And it sounds like what's happening in Great Britain is that there's not that communication. It is that do as I say because I said so.
Would you say, as a rule, a happy athlete is more likely to be a more successful athlete?
Absolutely. A happy athlete will be more successful, because overall, at the end of the day, they're not going to be gymnasts forever. You know, there is a lifespan, and that lifespan of being a gymnast is getting pushed further and further, which is great. But at some point you will stop. So what is the value you're taking from it, from all of your gymnastics experience? When you have that, that is success. When you have those positive experiences and you are going to send them on to the next generation, that is what success looks like. It's not really about the medals. You know, the medals come, the medals go, the medals get put in a safe. But really, what is the success with all of it?
It's interesting you say that it's not about the medals, because here we see that as a fundamental problem, that the drive for medals is so acute that that's where the cracks appear.
Absolutely. I mean, because that's the innate thing. It's about getting the medal. But if you think that getting the way to get the medal is through abusive measures, then you're doing it wrong.
And those abusive measures, do you think there's any way that they can breed success, or do you think it's always going to hold an athlete back?
Well, if we go back to what my definition of success was, it won't breed success. It might breed medals, but it's not going to breed success, because you're going to have an athlete that's broken at the end of it.
What is your general philosophy on positive coaching, and how do you think you might be able to influence coaches who don't operate the same way that you have and do?
Well, for me personally, you know, I was told that I wouldn't be a successful coach because I wasn't mean enough. I wasn't strict enough. I allowed my athletes too much leeway. And when I talk about leeway, you know, I had a lesson plan. I had a design about what I wanted my day, week, month, year to look like, but it was flexible, you know, and I was able to do that with the communication. To me, the most important thing is the communication with the athlete, and as well with the parent if you're dealing with a younger athlete, because it's, especially while they're a minor, their parent is their sounding board, you know, and as long as you have a parent that's supportive and not too pushy, you're going to have a really good line of communication. So, I mean, overall, that's where I come from.
And is there an issue sometimes with parents and their relationship with the coach and their relationship with the gymnast? Can that cause an issue?
Absolutely. There are overzealous parents who just think that their child is going to be the next big star. And yes, we all dream big for our children, but when they hold the coaches to a standard that can't be met as far as how they excel through a sport, and they hold the coach responsible for that, when sometimes things just aren't going to add up to what the parents' dreams and wishes are. And I think that puts the pressure on the coach to try to create something that isn't really realistic.
Clearly, in the UK, there are some bad coaches out there. There has to be, with the sheer level of testimony we've had. When I say bad coaches, I mean coaches who operate in an abusive way to a small degree or a larger degree. What would your message as such a successful coach be to those coaches?
I think to those coaches, I would say take a step back and reevaluate what you've done in the past, especially if you have accusations coming out. You have to look and see, when did this happen? Where was I personally in that situation? Where was I in my life? Because this is all about growth. It has to be a growth mindset. It has to be, I may have done that and I can see how it was wrong, and I'm sorry, athlete. This is where I made a mistake and I am working on changing it. And I appreciate you sharing your experiences with me so that I can grow.
Do you think it's possible to do that for a very, very experienced coach who's already always behaved in exactly the same way? Do you think there really is a future for them in the sport?
Absolutely. Yes, I absolutely, because I do believe you can teach an old dog new tricks. And it's really a choice. I mean, our brains are massive and we can make changes. Just because you did something some way in the past or you had seen it done a particular way, it doesn't mean you have to stick with that. Even as a parent, I will change how I parent because you're starting to do something and you realize it's not working. And a successful coach, one with lots of medals, can say, well, what I have done has worked. But again, back to the definition of success. Did it really work? Are your athletes now enrolling their kids in gymnastics? Do your athletes want to come and coach for you? Will this go on for generation after generation after generation, or will there continue the cycle of abuse? So it's really a choice to change. If you make the choice to change, you can change.
And the challenge for gymnastics at the moment, here and everywhere else, is to break that cycle of abuse, because it clearly does exist, doesn't it?
Correct.
And how do you go about that? Is that just coach education, or is that clearing them out and starting again?
Well, I think that, for me at this point, it is, I'm focusing on a series of breaking the cycle. What is this cycle that we're in? And coaches need to be able to understand that, they don't have to, they should be doing what they know, not what they've seen in the past or what they thought was right in the past, because the world changes. And yes, it worked before. It's not working now. We have a whole generation of athletes and young people who know that they can speak out, that they have a voice. And before, it was hidden behind this curtain of fear. And I feel like the athletes are moving away from that. So if we can focus on breaking the cycle, then we can educate the coaches, the athletes, and the parents all together as a triad to get them to work together for that ultimate success, for bringing home the medals and bringing home that positive, healthy athlete.
And are you confident that in the current environment, when there's bound to be pressure for success, as in medal success, that is achievable?
Absolutely. But again, it all goes back to a choice. If a coach is willing to make a choice to change, it's as simple as that. You can make a choice.
Because it's a sad legacy for the sport, isn't it? Which is such a beautiful sport, but there are so many broken bodies and broken minds out there.
Absolutely. Me personally, I've been in gymnastics over 40 years, and I had a coach that made me, well, I can't say I ever hated gymnastics, but it made me fall out of love with gymnastics because I felt so terrible when he was my coach. And I decided when I was going to become a professional coach, and this was going to be my career, I decided that I didn't want to coach the way that he coached me, that I never wanted another child to feel the way that I felt. So at that point, and I was young when I made that decision, at that point, I decided this is where my change happens. This is where my cycle breaks. Now, that doesn't mean that athletes are always happy. It doesn't mean that parents are always happy. And it doesn't mean that coaches are always happy. We're not looking for this Shangri-La, but what we're looking for is change and understanding and communication.
Because gymnastics is tough, right? If you want to be very, very good or the best, it's tough.
It's tough. It hurts. It is a hard sport. An athlete has to decide what is a pain in your body and what's an actual injury. So I would ask athletes, are you hurt or are you injured? And they would look at me like, well, what's the difference? Well, when you're hurt, you can keep going and then you'll know when to stop. If you're injured, you need to stop, and it needs to stop right now, and we need to have it evaluated. Because I'll tell you, my body still hurts. It hurts getting out of bed in the morning, but that doesn't mean I'm injured. That doesn't mean that my day doesn't continue on. when you swing bars, your hands are going to rip. You're going to get bloody hands. Climbing the rope, it's hard. But if you're asked to climb the rope 20 times because you fell off the balance beam, that is not constructive. So the coaching needs to go in the way of what we're doing here is constructive. If you keep falling over in a handstand, well, then you need to do more handstand work. That's not abusive, that is constructive. So I think that coaching needs to be definitely focused that way.
Do you subscribe, and it's something we've heard from, not many coaches have spoken out, but a lot of them that will speak to us privately, they talk about a gray area in coaching of what is hard, tough coaching and what is abuse. Do you think there is a gray area, or do you think there's a line that you're either the right side or the wrong side?
I think it's really situational, and I think it depends on who is observing the situation, because ultimately it will come down to what the athlete's perception was, because my intention as a coach might be very different than what the athlete perceives. And that will change as they're a child going through adolescence, a teenager becoming an adult. You know, your brain chemistry changes, so how you perceive the world around you changes. So I do think it's very gray. And, but again, that opens up the line. You need to have that open line of communication, because if you have a young athlete, the parent is usually their spokesperson, and the parent can come in and say, my daughter felt this way when you did this. And then you can explain what your intentions were and, you know, hopefully come to a resolution. And as they get older, the child will witness the parent speaking up for them. And then as they move through life, they're going to feel the confidence to speak to that coach.
I know for sure that many of the women, or probably all of the women who have stood up, and young women, most of them have stood up and been brave enough to tell their stories for change, will be listening to you thinking, I wish you'd been my coach. But do you have a message for them about what they've done and the movement they've started?
Well, I think it's the movement that they've started is amazing. I mean, I think if it had started 10 years ago, it would have been even better. I think our sport would have been better. I want them to encourage to continue to speak out. I mean, I've even personally put myself out there to say, if I've ever done anything to you as one of my athletes, please let me know, because I want to grow. I want to know where I could have done better. So the fact that they're bringing this stuff up and trying to share their experiences, they're not doing it to take someone down. They're doing it to lift someone up. You know, they're doing it to lift the future up. So it's super important that they keep on this track.
And do you think that this time this really will make a difference?
I hope so. I mean, I feel like more coaches need to start speaking up. Again, from my personal experience, when I was coming up and I was told that I wasn't mean enough to be good, basically. And I was okay with that. Okay, fine. I won't be the best coach in the world, but I'm going to have healthy athletes when they leave. And that was the most important. And then all I had to do was educate myself technically to become a better coach. Again, a choice I made. I'm not going to demean athletes until they're obedient. I am just going to make sure that technically I know as much as I possibly can to support their gymnastics. Because in the end, it's just gymnastics, and they need to feel happy when they walk away, when they walk away from it.
But you only have to look at your CV, your athletes, and your success as complete proof that that method works.
Correct. You know, and there were a lot of doubters. And I think that even to this day, there's probably people that say, well, she coached Simone Biles. You know, it was easy. No, it wasn't easy. You know, Simone was not an easy adolescent. She was not an easy teenager. I went through the same things with her that every coach goes through. The thing with Simone is that she learned skills really fast, most of them. Some took a very long time, but she learned how to do her skills really fast. But that's not the biggest part of coaching. Coaching is holistic. You know, you are helping raise a child. And when you have athletes in the gym that many hours, even some of your, you know, what would be considered lower level athletes, 8s, 9s, 10s, you know, we're not just talking about elites. Those kids are committing so much of their lives in the gym that coaches see them more than their parents do. So therefore, we do have a responsibility to make sure that they are being raised properly.
And if you'd have during that time with Simone, if you'd have shouted at her, made her train on injuries, made her do things she didn't want to do, would she have ended up being the athlete she was?
Well, first of all, I did shout at Simone sometimes, again, but it was a relationship. And so I'm not faultless, but I do think that the biggest thing about the relationship and what we shared is that it kept her in the sport. She loves gymnastics. She loves to flip, but she would have, even as tiny as she is, she would have been an amazing track star. She's fast. She could have gone and done anything she wanted to and been amazing because she's incredibly athletic. So it was about keeping her in the sport and keeping her love for the sport. And her parents were so supportive of her that if she said, I'm not doing gym anymore, it would have been over. So we made sure that she loved being in the gym.
Yeah, you make a good point. So if you had behaved perhaps differently and you hadn't been Simone focused, she might have walked away.
Absolutely. She would have walked away. I have no doubt in my mind that if there are other coaches out there who know Simone who have said she never would have lasted 2 days in my gym. And that response to me is appalling because I was like, well, what are you doing in your gym that would make a kid not want to last 2 days? But they knew her personality and they knew that her personality would not fit in their program.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Can I ask you one final thing? If you had a message to the gymnast community, if you like, in the UK at the moment, which is going through a really difficult time because there's a lot of soul searching going on at the moment. And they respect everything that you stand for and you have achieved. What would you say to them about this? What is quite a dark period in gymnastics in Britain?
I think the biggest thing is to open up that line of communication. Coaches have to drop their barriers a little bit and say, okay, parents, I want to hear from you. Athletes, I want to hear from you. Because in the long run, everything will come out better. And it's the vulnerability, like it's scary. And I understand that it's scary for these coaches to open themselves up because there's going to be ridicule there. They're going to hear about, I don't like when you do this. And you have to dig deep. And the coaches have to decide, well, that's who I am and that's who I've decided I'm going to be. But then they have to live with that. And other coaches are going to look at it and say, I had no idea I was doing that. That was never my intention. I'm going to be more aware of it. And they'll have to live with that. And so it's really about what the coaches can live with, but it definitely starts out with the communication. And this evening, I'm not sure what time it is for you guys, but we're doing a success summit and we've got 3 other speakers and myself, and we're actually kind of discussing that triad with the coach, athlete, and parent communication and how we can all come together and, through compassion and listening, having that communication open so that these athletes can be successful.